All right, so are you ready to unlock the secrets to speaking English fluently?
I think everyone's ready for that.
I know I am. We're going to be diving deep into this guide, 9 secrets to speaking English fluently and easily.
Sounds good to me.
And hopefully we'll be able to break down the techniques that'll help anyone reach fluency.
Yeah, because who doesn't want a cheat sheet for fluency?
Exactly. Cut through the clutter, get right to what works.
And what I think is really cool about this guide is that it's not your typical textbook stuff.
Oh, really?
It's like it dives into the mindset
Oh, wow.
and the strategies you need to actually make it happen in the real world.
So it's not all about just memorizing verb conjugations and all that.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So let's jump right into the first secret then, embracing the learner's mindset.
Okay?
Sounds pretty basic, but what does that actually look like, in practice?
It's all about seeing those stumbles, those fumbles, those inevitable mistakes as like opportunities to learn.
Okay.
Instead of like beating yourself up over them.
Yeah.
Like imagine you're learning to play a really complex piece of music on the piano.
Oh, gosh.
You wouldn't expect to just nail it on the first try, would you?
Definitely not. I'd be hitting all the wrong notes, probably.
Exactly. And each one of those like mistakes, they're giving you valuable feedback. They're telling you, okay, adjust your technique here, and eventually you'll get to that flawless performance.
I like that analogy a lot.
And language is so similar.
Oh, yeah.
Like every time you kind of mess up, you're actually gaining these insights into how this amazing language works.
That's true.
I remember when I was learning Italian,
Oh, yeah.
I kept using the wrong preposition for this one particular sentence structure.
Oh, gosh.
And it was so frustrating. But instead of giving up, I decided to really analyze it, like what was going on there. And you know what? I ended up discovering this subtle little nuance that I had completely missed before.
Oh, wow.
And my understanding of prepositions just like skyrocketed after that.
That's a perfect example of how just reframing those mistakes can lead to these breakthroughs.
Totally.
But how can someone listening actually cultivate this learner's mindset? Like, what are some practical things they can do?
Well, this guide actually gives a couple of really good practical methods.
Okay.
One is to start a progress journal.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just take a few minutes each day to jot down what you've learned, maybe what went well, what you struggled with.
Okay.
Because then when you look back and you see how far you've come, it's incredibly motivating.
I love that. I love the progress journal idea because it's like a tangible record of your growth.
Yes.
Especially on those days where you feel like, I'm not getting anywhere. You can look back and be like, wow, I've come a long way.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. What about rewarding yourself for those wins, even the small ones? Does that tie into this?
Oh, absolutely. Celebrating those milestones helps reinforce positive learning habits.
Okay.
And it keeps you motivated, whether it's a small treat
Yeah.
or watching an episode of your favorite show.
Yeah.
Even just taking a break to do something you enjoy. Those little rewards, they go a long way.
I like that. All right, so let's move on to secret number 2. Speaking as often as possible, even if you're alone.
Okay.
I have to admit, I've definitely caught myself having conversations with my plants in English before.
I think we've all been there.
But, is that actually helpful?
It might sound a little silly,
Yeah.
but there's actually some solid science behind this.
Okay.
Because every time you speak, you're engaging those muscles that are involved in producing those specific sounds.
I've never thought about that.
It's like working out at the gym, but for your vocal cords and your brain.
Oh, wow.
I remember when I was getting ready for a big presentation in Spanish,
Okay.
and I was pretty nervous about it, so I started practicing out loud, even when I was alone in my apartment.
You were just talking to yourself.
Yeah, I would pace around talking to this imaginary audience, asking them questions, responding to their reactions.
Oh, wow.
It felt a little awkward at first,
Yeah.
but the more I did it, the more natural it became.
So it's all about building that muscle memory.
Yes.
Getting your brain and your mouth used to forming those sounds.
Exactly.
Cool. And the best part is you can do it anytime, anywhere.
All right.
Narrate your day, have these imaginary debates, sing along to English songs. Just get those words flowing.
Exactly. Just find those opportunities to speak and let it flow.
Speaking of flow, that leads us perfectly into the next secret.
Okay.
Which emphasizes the power of listening. Why is listening so important for fluency?
Well, think about how we all learned our first language. We spent months, maybe even years, just absorbing those sounds and patterns
Right.
before we ever even uttered a word.
Yeah.
So listening, it's really the foundation upon which we build our understanding of any language.
You know what? I've actually noticed that when I spend a lot of time watching movies or TV shows in English, my pronunciation and intonation actually improve.
Interesting.
It's like my brain's subconsciously picking up on those nuances.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like you're immersing yourself in the language.
Right.
Even if it's just virtually.
Yeah.
And this guide, It actually has some great suggestions for maximizing your listening practice.
I'm assuming podcasts are one of them.
Oh, podcasts are amazing.
I love podcasts.
And there's honestly something for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, if you're interested in news analysis, you could try The Daily from the New York Times.
Okay.
Or if you want, like, science and storytelling, there's this really cool podcast called Radio Lab.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
And if you're looking for something a little more humorous,
okay.
I highly recommend My Dad Wrote a Porno.
That sounds hilarious.
So funny.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out. And of course, we can't forget about music.
Of course not.
Such a great way to not only pick up new vocabulary and idioms and slang, but also just to kind of get that pronunciation and intonation in a fun way.
Right. Because it's way more fun than just doing drills.
Yes, exactly.
Singing along.
So much more enjoyable.
Much better.
Okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty of language learning.
All right.
Secret number 4, chunking and collocations.
Love these.
Can you break down for us what those are and why they're so important for fluency?
Okay, so imagine you're building a house.
Okay.
It would take forever if you had to lay each brick one by one, right?
Yeah, that would be very time-consuming.
Chunking and collocations are like having these prefabricated walls and roof sections.
Oh.
So you could assemble things much faster.
Okay.
And create a more, like, cohesive structure.
I'm liking this analogy. So instead of focusing on individual words, we should be looking for these chunks of language.
Yes. And these chunks are called collocations.
Okay.
They're so common in English.
Okay.
For example, we say heavy rain.
Okay.
Not strong rain.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or make a decision.
Yeah.
Not take a decision.
I see. I think I do that sometimes.
And that's where these collocations come in. They help you sound more natural and fluent by using combinations that native speakers just instinctively use.
Yeah, because I noticed that sometimes, like, I know all the vocabulary, but I can't quite figure out how to put them together in the right way.
Exactly.
So how can listeners start incorporating these chunking and collocations into their routine?
So one really simple technique is to create what's called a phrase notebook.
Okay.
So as you're reading or listening and you come across these collocations, just jot them down in your notebook.
Okay.
Along with their meanings and maybe some example sentences.
I like that. And I would assume that these space repetition apps we talked about earlier would also be helpful for this.
Oh, they're amazing for this.
Yeah.
Because space repetition helps move information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory.
Okay.
By presenting you with that material at gradually increasing intervals.
Gotcha.
So it's like having a personal trainer, but for your vocabulary.
Nice. Okay, let's move on to secret number 5, and this one might be reassuring to our listener.
Okay.
It's okay to simplify your sentence structures, especially at the beginning.
Especially at the beginning?
Does that mean we don't have to worry about grammar?
No, grammar's still important.
Okay.
But fluency isn't about trying to build these, like, super complex sentences right away.
Right.
Actually, using shorter, simpler sentences can make you sound more confident and more fluent.
Interesting.
Especially when you're still developing your skills.
So it's more about clarity and conciseness than trying to, sound super smart with your grammar.
Exactly. Imagine you're explaining, like, a really complex concept to someone.
Okay.
It's way easier to understand if you break it down into smaller, bite-sized chunks. Right?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely get caught up sometimes trying to construct these elaborate sentences, and it just ends up sounding confusing.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
So there's a really simple technique from the guide.
Okay.
You start with a basic sentence.
Uh-huh.
Like, I enjoy reading.
Okay.
Then you gradually add details and complexity.
Oh, I like that.
So you could say, I enjoy reading books about history.
Okay.
And then expand it further. I enjoy reading books about history, especially biographies of influential leaders.
So you're building upon that simple sentence.
Yes.
Without making it overly complicating.
Exactly.
So it's finding that balance between clarity and complexity.
Yes.
And, starting simple and then gradually working your way up.
That's the key. And don't be afraid to experiment and see what feels more natural for you.
Yeah.
You might find that certain sentence structures are easier for you to produce than others.
Right.
The important thing is to keep practicing, keep refining those skills.
Practice makes perfect, as they say.
Or at least progress.
Or at least progress, yeah.
That's the goal.
Exactly.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the secrets of fluent English.
So we've already uncovered some really cool strategies so far.
Yeah, we're just getting started.
But I'm always up for more tips and tricks, you know what I mean? What else does this guide have in store for us?
It talks a lot about staying curious.
Okay.
And like making your learning engaging.
I can definitely see how that would be important. Like if you're genuinely interested in something, it's got to be way easier to stay motivated, right?
Exactly. It's like instead of slogging through those boring textbook exercises,
oh, yeah.
you're exploring subjects that actually pique your curiosity.
Right.
Whether it's, technology, sports, global news.
Okay.
Even something like cooking or fashion.
Ooh, fashion.
That's a good one.
Like, imagine diving into the world of, like, fashion magazines and blogs and documentaries all in English.
Yeah.
You'd not only be picking up new vocabulary, but you'd also be gaining these insights into, like, cultural trends and perspectives.
Totally. That's exactly what it's all about.
Okay.
And it brings us to another important aspect of fluency, cultural immersion.
Oh, okay.
Because language is so much more than just, words and grammar.
Right.
It's a reflection of a culture's values, its history, its way of life.
I like that. So by immersing ourselves in English language media, we're kind of getting a deeper understanding of the culture that shapes the language.
Yeah, it's like you're getting this backstage pass to how native speakers actually think and express themselves.
That's cool. So it's not just about memorizing vocabulary lists. You're connecting with, like, the heart and soul of the language.
Yes, exactly.
I love those aha moments. When you finally grasp a tricky grammar concept.
Yeah.
Or you effortlessly use a new idiom in conversation.
The best feeling.
But this guide really emphasizes, like, acknowledging even the small victories.
Yes.
Those tiny steps forward that might seem insignificant at the time. Why is that so important?
It's all about maintaining motivation and momentum.
Okay.
Because language learning, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
For sure.
And there are going to be times when you hit a plateau, you feel discouraged.
Yeah, definitely been there.
But if you can train yourself to recognize and appreciate those tiny little sparks of progress,
Okay.
it makes all the difference in staying the course.
It's like those fitness trackers that celebrate every 1,000 steps you take.
Yes.
Even if you haven't quite reached your daily goal yet.
Exactly. It's like those little nudges of encouragement.
They can be really motivating.
Very motivating. And it's important to celebrate those wins in a way that works for you.
Yeah.
So maybe it's treating yourself to a fancy coffee or watching an episode of your favorite show.
Okay.
Or just taking a moment to savor that feeling of accomplishment.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about staying curious, immersing ourselves in the culture, celebrating those small wins.
Yeah.
What about the practical side of things? Like,
Okay.
how does this guide recommend structuring our study time?
It offers this sample weekly plan
Okay.
that emphasizes a balance between focused study
Uh-huh.
and then real-world application.
I like that.
And of course, you can tailor it to your own needs and preferences.
Right.
But the general idea is to dedicate specific blocks of time
Okay.
to different aspects of language learning.
Got it. So, for example, Mondays could be for grammar review
Yes,
and maybe practicing conversation with a language partner.
perfect. Exactly. Then midweek, you might focus on expanding your vocabulary,
Okay.
maybe by learning new collocations
Oh, yeah.
related to a topic that you're passionate about.
Cool.
You could read articles, listen to podcasts, even watch documentaries on that subject,
Uh-huh.
and actively jot down any interesting phrases or expressions that you come across.
I like that. And maybe Fridays could be for, like, fine-tuning pronunciation through drills or shadowing exercises.
Exactly. And don't forget to leverage the weekend for immersive experiences.
Okay.
Maybe you attend an English language meetup,
Oh, cool.
or you watch a movie without subtitles,
Oh, that's a good one.
or you just chat with a friend in English.
Okay.
Those real-life interactions are so valuable.
Yeah, it sounds like the key is to create a routine that works for you and then stick to it consistently.
Absolute consistency is key.
Okay, but let's circle back to those 9 secrets for a second.
Okay.
And see if there are any specific strategies that we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay.
I know we talked about chunking and collocations in the first part.
Yeah.
Any additional tips on how to really master those?
One thing this guide emphasizes is the importance of context.
Okay.
So don't just memorize collocations in isolation.
Uh-huh.
Try to encounter them in their natural habitat, so to speak.
Okay.
Pay attention to how they're used in articles, books, movies, conversations.
It's like learning a new dance move. You can watch videos and try to mimic the steps,
Yeah.
but it's not until you actually get out on the dance floor
Yeah.
and try it out in a real setting that you truly understand how it works.
I love that analogy.
That's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, the more you encounter those collocations in those authentic contexts,
Okay.
the later you'll understand their nuances and how to use them effectively.
Okay, so context is key. What about those of us who tend to overthink our sentences
Yeah.
and get stuck in grammar land?
Oh, yeah.
Any advice for overcoming that?
The guide reminds us that fluency is not about grammatical perfection.
Okay.
It's about conveying your message clearly and confidently.
Uh-huh.
even if your sentences aren't perfectly structured.
So it's better to speak like a slightly imperfect sentence fluently
Yes,
than to stumble over a grammatically perfect sentence.
exactly. And remember that technique we talked about earlier, sentence expansion?
Oh, yeah.
You can start with a basic sentence and gradually add details and complexity as you become more comfortable.
I like that. So the key is to prioritize clarity and flow over grammatical intricacy.
Especially in spoken English, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm curious about those techniques we discussed for refining pronunciation, like reading aloud and shadowing.
Yeah,
Any additional tips for getting the most out of those?
absolutely. When you're reading aloud, try to focus not only on the accuracy of your pronunciation,
Okay.
but also on the rhythm and intonation of the language.
So it's not just about saying the words correctly, but also about capturing that natural flow and expressiveness.
It's like adding musicality to your speech.
Oh, I like that a lot. And what about shadowing?
Okay, so one helpful tip is to break down the audio clip into smaller chunks.
Okay.
So instead of trying to shadow a whole podcast episode,
Right.
you could start with a short segment, maybe a minute or two.
Okay.
Listen to it several times, paying attention to the speaker's pronunciation and intonation. Then pause the audio and try to mimic the speaker as closely as possible.
Gotcha. So it's like practicing a short musical phrase on an instrument,
Yeah.
getting each note and nuance just right before moving on to the next phrase.
I love that analogy. It's perfect. And just like with music practice, consistency is key.
Okay.
Even a few minutes of shadowing practice each day can really improve your pronunciation and fluency over time.
I know we've talked about setting SMART goals, but sometimes the sheer scope of language learning can feel overwhelming.
Yes.
Any advice for like breaking down those fluency aspirations into more manageable chunks?
The guide suggests setting smaller, more specific goals
Okay.
that align with your overall fluency objectives.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of simply aiming to improve my vocabulary,
Yeah.
you could set a goal to learn 10 new collocations related to travel each week.
I like that that's much more concrete and measurable.
Yes, exactly. And it feels much more attainable than just saying, I want to learn all the English words.
Right. And it's still contributing to that broader goal of fluency.
Exactly. And don't forget to track your progress.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you use a notebook, a spreadsheet, a language learning app, having that visual representation of your achievements can be so motivating.
For sure. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this segment, exploring all these practical tips and strategies for boosting fluency.
We have.
But before we move on to our final thoughts,
Okay.
I want to circle back to that concept of balance for a second.
Okay.
We've talked about balancing focused study with real-world application.
Right.
But what about balancing the different elements of language learning itself?
That's such a good point. Remember that three-legged stool analogy we discussed earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Fluency is built on that solid foundation of grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation.
Uh-huh.
And neglecting any one of those areas can weaken that entire structure.
It's so tempting to focus on the areas we enjoy most.
Yeah.
Like, I love reading, so I could spend hours reading English novels
Yeah.
or binge watching TV shows, but then maybe I neglect those grammar exercises or pronunciation drills.
Yeah, it's natural to gravitate towards what we find enjoyable.
Yeah.
But it's so important to find that balance
Okay.
that ensures that you're dedicating sufficient time and attention to all three legs of the stool.
So how can our listener make sure they're maintaining that balance?
The guide suggests creating a cyclical practice schedule
Okay.
where you alternate between those different areas of language learning.
Okay.
So, for instance, you might focus on grammar exercises and conversation practice on Mondays,
Okay.
vocabulary building and writing on Wednesdays,
Gotcha.
and pronunciation drills and listening comprehension on Fridays.
So you're cycling through
Exactly.
and hitting all those different areas.
Yes. And of course, you can adjust the schedule to fit your own preferences and learning style.
Right. It's all about finding what works for you.
That's the key.
That's a great reminder because it's so easy to get caught up in one aspect of language learning and neglect the others.
Yeah.
But just like with a balanced diet, variety is key for overall fluency health.
I love that analogy. Variety is key.
All right, so here we are at the final part of our fluency deep dive.
Yeah, we've explored 9 secrets, a whole bunch of strategies. Now we just got to bring it all together.
So it's like our fluency action plan, ready to go to put it all into practice.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So what are the key takeaways, the biggest ha moments from this whole guide?
You know, one of the most powerful ideas is that fluency. It's not like this finish line you cross. You know? It's this ongoing process. It's a journey of discovery and growth.
I like that because then you can enjoy the process and celebrate those milestones.
Exactly. And it kind of ties in with that whole learner's mindset thing. You know, it's shifting away from that fear of making mistakes.
Right.
To being curious about what you can learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
When you're not afraid to stumble, you're more likely to experiment, take risks,
Totally.
and really immerse yourself.
But mistakes can be discouraging sometimes, especially when you feel like you're stuck.
Right.
So how can our listener, use this guide to kind of break through those plateaus?
Well, immersion is key.
Okay.
This guide really emphasizes surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Yeah.
So podcasts, movies, music, even social media.
Yeah, I've been really into documentaries lately.
Oh, nice.
And there are so many good ones in English. It's like a great way to learn about different topics and improve my listening at the same time.
That's awesome. And remember the power of real-world interactions.
Right.
Whether it's through language exchange apps or conversation clubs or just chatting with friends.
Yeah.
Those authentic experiences, they're so essential.
So it's putting those skills to the test in the real world.
Exactly. Which can be a little scary at first, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to one of the most practical strategies from the guide, chunking and collocations.
Yes.
Like, it's such a good way to sound more natural and fluent.
I think such.
Instead of searching for the individual words, you just have these ready-made chunks.
It's like a secret weapon.
Exactly. So the more you see these collocations in real situations, the better you'll understand them.
Exactly. So it's not just about memorizing those lists.
Right.
It's about observing how those phrases are used in real life.
Yeah.
Like noticing how a character in a movie uses a particular phrase.
Yeah.
Or paying attention to the word combinations in a news article.
So paying attention to those little things.
Exactly. And for those who get kind of bogged down by the grammar,
yeah,
remember fluency. It's not about perfection.
So it's okay to start with those simpler sentences.
Absolutely. And gradually add that complexity as you get more comfortable.
Right. Just focus on getting your message across.
Yes.
Okay. And then last but not least, those techniques for refining pronunciation, reading aloud and shadowing.
Those are good ones.
Any final tips to make those even more effective?
So when you're reading aloud, try to really embody the language.
Okay.
Pay attention to that rhythm, intonation, the pauses, the emphasis, like you're an actor delivering a line.
Oh, channeling your inner Shakespeare.
Exactly. And when you're shadowing, focus on those smaller chunks.
Yeah.
Listen really closely to how that speaker is shaping those sounds and try to mimic them.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to record yourself. And then listen back.
Because sometimes it's eye-opening.
It's like, whoa, that's what I sounds like.
Exactly. And when it comes to staying motivated, remember those specific achievable goals.
Those SMART goals, right?
Yes.
But don't just vaguely aim for fluency.
Right.
Break it down into those smaller steps.
Exactly. So, for example, you could say, I'm going to learn 5 new idioms related to work this week.
Okay.
Or I'm going to practice shadowing for 10 minutes each day.
Okay.
Because those concrete targets, they'll help you stay focused.
And track that progress, so you can see how far you've come.
It's encouraging, especially on those days when you're not feeling so motivated.
Totally. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, got to bring it back to balance one last time.
Yes.
Fluency, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. Make sure you're nurturing all three.
All 3 legs of the steel.
Exactly. So, if you're spending hours and hours on vocabulary, but you're not practicing your pronunciation.
Yeah, you got to shift your focus a little bit.
Got to find that equilibrium.
Exactly. And remember, the best way to learn is by doing. Don't be afraid to step outside that comfort zone.
Right.
And use your English in real life situations.
Exactly. So ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, chatting with a stranger.
Yeah, those interactions, they'll build your skills and your confidence.
So there you have it. 9 secrets, a ton of strategies, and a reminder. Enjoy the journey.
Embrace it.
This guy asks a great question. How will you personalize these secrets and make them your own?
It's up to you.
So reflect on what you learned today and start creating your own path. Remember, language learning's an adventure. Keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep sharing your gift of language.
Until next time, happy language learning.
All right, let's dive in. We're unlocking a vault today filled with 25 uncommon but incredibly useful English words.
And these aren't just any old words, no. We're giving you the good stuff.
Yeah, these words are going to add some serious depth to your conversations. And maybe even a touch of magic, who knows?
Exactly. It's like we're equipping you with a whole new set of tools for expressing yourself.
So first up is astonishing. Everyone uses amazing or surprising.
Yeah, but astonishing, that's something else.
It is. It hits different, right?
Absolutely. It's like you've seen something that changes everything, It shifts your perspective.
Like if you were describing the Northern Lights and you're like, the Northern Lights display was absolutely astonishing. It just takes it up a notch.
Right. It's not just a description, it's an experience.
It really is. Okay, so let's talk about a word that gives you a completely different feeling. Bliss.
Bliss is so much more than just happy. It's like this deep sense of peace and joy.
Yeah, it's like that feeling you get when you're meditating or when you're out in nature. Have you ever felt that when you're out hiking?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like that feeling of pure contentment.
Yeah. And not just a fleeting emotion, it's like a state of being.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think we've all experienced this next one. Sometimes you don't even have the right word for it, but this word is perfect. Dwindle.
Ah, yes. Like watching a campfire slowly die out, or the last drops of coffee in your mug.
Oh, I can picture it perfectly.
Time, resources, and motivation, they can all dwindle away.
Yeah, it's that gradual decrease. Like it slowly fades away. It makes you really think about how you use your time and resources.
It does.
Okay, so speaking of resources, what about a word for making the most of what you have? Being smart about it. Frugal.
Frugal sometimes gets a bad rap like it means being cheap, but it's not about that at all. It's about being mindful, you know?
Yeah, it's about intentionality.
Right.
Like making conscious decisions about your spending. So you're not wasting anything. It's almost like a whole philosophy.
It is. And it's not just about money. It's about everything. Time, energy, resources.
That's a good point. Okay, so let's move on to a word that's all about authenticity. Genuine.
Genuine is so important, especially these days.
I know, right? It's like everyone's trying to be someone they're not.
Exactly.
But genuine is all about being real, being true to yourself and to others too.
Yeah. And when you compliment someone's genuine nature, it means something.
It really does, because you're acknowledging that they're sincere, that they're not putting on an act.
Right. It's a compliment that goes a long way.
Okay, now let's talk about a word that can sometimes be a bit of a roadblock. Hinder.
Hinder, yeah. That's about the obstacles we face in life.
It could be anything, right? Procrastination, fear, even outside forces that are out of our control.
It's acknowledging those things that are holding us back.
Because once you acknowledge them, you can start to overcome them.
Exactly.
Now, have you ever worked on a project or maybe tried to learn a new skill and felt like it was just way too much?
All the time.
Complicated comes to mind. But what about the word intricate?
Ooh, intricate is good. It's like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's complex, but it's also beautifully structured, like a fancy watch or something.
Right, there's an order to it.
It's not just chaos, it's organized complexity.
I like that, organized complexity.
Okay, intricate. I'm going to use that one. Now, let's be real. We're all juggling a lot these days. Work, family, life, it's a lot.
It really is.
So the word juggle, it's pretty perfect, don't you think?
It is, because you're trying to keep all those bowls in the air.
Exactly. You're trying not to let anything drop.
And it takes practice, right? And focus.
Yeah, and a good sense of balance.
Definitely.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, what about a word that describes something that's financially rewarding?
Lucrative.
Lucrative. It has a nice ring to it.
It does.
It makes you think of success, abundance.
Exactly. Like a career that's not just fulfilling, but also goes well.
Or even a side hustle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now let's talk about a word that captures that sense of wonder and amazement. Marvel.
Marvel, like when you see something truly breathtaking.
Oh, I remember the first time I saw the Grand Canyon, it was just incredible. I was in awe. Like, how did this even happen?
Right, it's that feeling of wonder.
Yeah, an appreciation for something bigger than yourself.
It's a powerful feeling.
It is. Okay, so we live in a world where everything is connected, right? Technology is everywhere. So the word ubiquitous is pretty fitting, wouldn't you say?
It is. It's like smartphones, social media, they're everywhere you look.
Yeah, we're surrounded by it, and it makes you think about the impact it's having.
On everything.
On everything. Okay, let's wrap up this first round with a word that's all about embracing the unknown. Venture.
Venture, that's about taking risks, stepping outside your comfort zone.
Exactly. It could be starting a business, traveling to a new country, or just trying something new. It's about that willingness to explore.
And to see where it leads you.
Yeah, and to grow along the way.
Exactly. Even if it's a little bit scary.
It is. Okay, so we've covered some amazing words in this first round, but we've got more to come.
You know, when we were talking about venture, it can be kind of scary, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, you never know what's going to happen.
Right, and sometimes you just don't feel ready, like reluctance.
Exactly. Like, you want to stay in your comfort zone. It feels safe there.
I get it. But I also think sometimes reluctance can be a good thing.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Like, it gives you time to really appreciate what you already have, you know, before you jump into something new.
That's a good point. It's like that feeling right before you go on vacation.
Yes, that's a perfect example. Okay, so let's talk about a word that has a really cozy, comforting vibe to it. Quaint.
Quaint is just so charming, isn't it?
It is. It makes me think of those little towns you see in movies.
With the cobblestone streets and the cute little shops.
Yes, or like a cozy bookstore with a fireplace.
Yeah, it has that old-fashioned feel, doesn't it?
It does, like a simpler time.
Less hustle and bustle.
Yeah, definitely less stressful. Okay, so now let's move on to a word that's all about subtlety. Subtle.
Subtle is about those things you don't notice right away, but you make a big difference.
Like a faint smell of perfume. Or like the way someone raises an eyebrow.
Exactly. It's those little things that add depth and meaning.
Yeah, it's not about being loud or flashy. It's about the details.
Right, and sometimes those details are the most powerful.
They really are. Okay, so now let's talk about being practical and getting things done. Pragmatic.
Pragmatic people, they're the problem solvers.
Yeah, they're not afraid to roll up their sleeves and figure things out.
And they focus on what works, none of that fancy stuff, just solutions.
Yeah, and they're efficient too. They get right to the point.
Okay, so now let's switch gears again. What about a word for an idea that's just starting to form? Like a seed.
Notion.
Notion. I like that. It's like a glimmer of inspiration.
Exactly. Like you're not quite sure where it's going yet. Right. But it has potential. It could grow into something amazing. Or it might just fizzle out. But it's still worth paying attention to.
Oh, absolutely. You never know where those little notions might lead.
Okay, so now let's talk about the opposite of being insightful. Oblivious.
Oh, yeah. We all know someone who's oblivious.
They're just completely unaware of what's going on around them.
It's like they're in their own little world.
They can be kind of funny sometimes, but also a little frustrating.
Definitely. Like, how do you not see what's right in front of you?
Right. You got to pay attention to the cues.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're going to miss out.
Okay, remember we talked about keen earlier? It's like the opposite of oblivious.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
Keen is all about being alert and engaged, eager to learn.
While oblivious is like totally clueless.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so what about a word for being really passionate about something? Like super enthusiastic.
Zealous.
Zealous, that's the one. Like you're so into it, you can't contain yourself. It's contagious.
Yeah, and it inspires other people.
It does. Okay, now let's celebrate what makes each of us unique. Quirks.
Quirks are those little things that make you, you.
They're like your signature moves.
Exactly, like that friend who always wears mismatched socks.
Or the coworker who collects those weird little figurines.
Yeah, it's those things that make you interesting.
I love that. Quirks are awesome. Okay, so what about a word that describes who we are at our core?
Identity.
Identity, that's a big one.
It is. It's about your values, your beliefs, your experiences.
Everything that makes you, you. And it's always changing too, right?
Exactly. We're always growing and evolving.
Okay, before we move on, I want to talk about thrive again for a second.
Oh, thrive's a great word.
It is. It's like you're not just surviving, you're flourishing.
You're living your best life.
Yeah, you're reaching your full potential. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of great words, but we've got one more set to go. Okay, we're back, ready for the final round. What words are we looking at this time?
Well, let's start with yearn. It's a powerful word, you know?
It is. It makes me think of like really deep longing for something you can't have.
Yeah, like a lost love or a dream that feels impossible.
Right. It's that ache in your heart. But there's also beauty in it, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It shows how deeply we can feel.
Yeah, and it can be a motivator too. Like that yearning pushes you to try harder.
It does. It can push you to venture out and try new things.
Oh, I see the connection. Like yearn is the fuel and venture is the action.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about a word that's really important for success. Tenacity.
Oh, tenacity is huge. It's all about never giving up.
Yeah, it's like you're determined to reach your goal no matter what. You don't let anything stop you.
Right. You just keep pushing through.
It makes me think about our listeners, you know. How do they handle challenges? Are they tenacious?
That's a great question. It's something to think about.
It is. Okay, so tenacity is about never giving up. But what about persistent?
Persistent is a little different. It's more about consistency.
Okay, so like you're steadily working towards something, even if it takes a long time.
Yeah, it's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. You just keep at it and eventually you break through. Okay, so now let's talk about a word that describes something truly significant. Monumental.
Monumental, like a historical event that changes everything.
Yeah, or like a scientific discovery, or even a personal achievement that transforms your life.
Exactly. It's a turning point.
It makes you think about what really matters, you know, what leaves a mark on the world.
It does. And sometimes those monumental events are met with a lot of excitement. Remember zeal?
Yeah, like monumental describes the event and zeal describes the feeling.
Right. Okay, and speaking of feelings, let's revisit thrive. It's such an important word, especially when we're talking about personal growth.
It is. It's like you're not just existing, you're thriving.
You're living a full, meaningful life.
Yeah, you're constantly growing and evolving. Okay, so for our final word, we're going to talk about what makes you, you, identity.
Identity is a complex thing, isn't it? It's all the pieces that make you who you are.
Yeah, your beliefs, your experiences, your values, everything. And it's not fixed either, right?
No, it's always changing. We're always learning and growing.
I love that. It's like we're all works in progress. Well, I think we've covered some incredible words today. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too, and I hope our listeners have as well.
I hope they've been inspired to use these words in their own lives and to keep exploring language. There's always more to discover.
That's right. Words are powerful tools. Use them wisely.
So true. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this word journey.